The Korean mafia heir burst through the door in fury, ready to confront his ex-girlfriend after months of silence. But he froze completely when he saw her exhausted, holding two crying newborn babies in her arms. Power has a voice. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It walks into rooms and watches men lower their eyes. It signs documents that end bloodlines. It inherits empires built on silence and bone. Kang Ji-won was born into that voice. At 29, he wore his father's legacy like armor, cold, impenetrable, absolute. The Korean underground in New York knew his name, the way children know thunder, something that arrives without warning and leaves nothing unchanged. But on a November night, when rain turned the city silver and unforgiving, Ji-won stood outside a door he swore he'd never return to. His hands were fists, his heart was war. He came to demand answers. To rage. To break whatever illusion made her think she could vanish from his life without consequence. He didn't come to find her holding two infants who had his eyes. He didn't come to discover he'd been a father for 16 days without knowing. And he certainly didn't come to feel his empire. Every weapon, every soldier, every blood-soaked dollar turned to ash in his chest the moment one of those babies reached for him. This is not a story about a man who ruled the underworld. This is a story about the woman who made him kneel. The door didn't break when he kicked it. It simply opened. As if she'd been expecting him. As if she knew that sooner or later, rage would bring him back. Ji-won stepped into the apartment, small, dim, smelling of lavender and something sweet he couldn't name, and his fury arrived 3 seconds before his voice. "Where the hell have you—" Then he saw her. Amara. She stood by the window, her dark skin glowing bronze in the streetlight, her hair tied back in exhaustion, not elegance. She wore a loose shirt stained at the shoulder. Her eyes, those brown eyes that used to challenge him, tease him, strip him bare, looked hollow now, empty in a way that made his chest tighten. But it wasn't her exhaustion that froze him. It was what she held. 2 bundles. Small, squirming, impossibly fragile. Babies. Ji-won. Her voice cracked like old glass. "You shouldn't be here." He couldn't move. His mind, the same mind that calculated hits, negotiated treaties, dismantled rivals, went completely blank. One of the infants started crying. A sharp, desperate wail that cut through the apartment like a blade. Amara shifted, her movements slow and aching, trying to soothe the child. But the other one started too. Then both were screaming, and she was swaying, whispering things he couldn't hear, and her hands were shaking. Ji-won's fury evaporated. "Amara." His voice came out quieter than he intended. "Who's yours?" The word landed like a bullet. "They're yours, Ji-won." The room tilted. He heard the words, understood them. But they made no sense in the world he knew. The world where he controlled everything, saw everything, knew everything. "You were pregnant." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation wrapped in disbelief. She didn't look at him, just kept rocking the crying infants, her lips pressed together, her shoulders trembling. "I didn't know how to tell you." "So you didn't." His voice hardened. "You left, disappeared, changed your number, and now you—" "I was scared." The words ripped out of her, raw and broken. "I was terrified, Ji-won. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to raise your children alone while you built your empire on blood? You didn't give me a choice. Neither did you." Her eyes finally met his, and they were fire. "Every day with you was a choice between loving you and surviving you. And when I found out I was pregnant, with twins, I knew I couldn't do both." The babies were still crying. The sound burrowed into his skull, relentless and primal. He watched Amara try to calm them, watched her body sway with exhaustion, watched her eyes brim with tears she refused to let fall, and something in him cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice before the thaw. "When?" His voice was barely audible. "When did you know?" 3 months before I left." She swallowed hard. "I wanted to tell you. I tried. But every time I opened my mouth, someone died. Someone disappeared. Someone's family got a message written in violence. And I thought, what kind of mother brings children into that?" Ji-won took a step forward, then another, until he was close enough to see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled, the dried milk stain on her collar. So you chose to do it alone. His jaw tightened. In this place, with no help, no protection, nothing. I chose to keep them safe. From me. From your world. The distinction shattered something in his chest. Because she was right. His world didn't make room for soft things. For tiny hands and fragile heartbeats. For women who loved him enough to leave him. One of the babies, he couldn't tell which, stopped crying for a moment and turned its head. Dark eyes, impossibly familiar, locked onto his. And in that instant, Jiwon felt the ground disappear beneath him. What are their names? He whispered. Amara's breath caught. Mira and Elijah. Mira and Elijah, he repeated as if testing the weight of the words. As if learning a new language. Are they? 16 days old. 16 days. He'd been a father for 16 days and hadn't known. 16 days of late-night feedings, of exhaustion, of fear. And she'd done it all alone. Let me help. The words came out before he could stop them. Jiwon, let me help Amara. His voice was steel-wrapped in plea. Whatever you need, You can't just walk back into my life because you found out about them. I'm not asking to walk back in. He stepped closer until he could smell the lavender in her hair, the milk on her shirt, the exhaustion radiating off her skin. I'm telling you, I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever. Her eyes searched his, looking for the lie, the angle, the manipulation. But all she found was a man who'd just discovered he had something more valuable than any empire. Something he didn't know how to protect but would die trying. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. I know exactly what I'm saying. His hand reached out, hesitant, and touched the edge of the blanket wrapped around Mira. The baby's tiny fingers curled reflexively, and his breath stopped. I know I've been a father for 16 days without being a father at all, and I know that ends tonight. Jiwon called his driver, told him to bring supplies, diapers, formula, clothes, things he didn't know the names of but described in clipped, urgent commands. The man on the other end didn't ask questions. He never did. Amara watched from the couch, Mira and Elijah finally quiet in her arms, their small bodies rising and falling with shallow breaths. She looked at Jiwon the way someone looks at a storm, uncertain if it will pass or destroy everything. You can't fix this with money, she said quietly. I'm not trying to fix it. He pocketed his phone and turned to face her. I'm trying to keep you from drowning. I was managing. You were surviving. His voice was sharp, cutting through her defenses. There's a difference. She wanted to argue, to tell him she didn't need him, didn't want him here, didn't trust him not to turn their lives into collateral damage. But the truth was heavier than pride. The truth was she hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a row since the twins were born. The truth was the rent was overdue, the formula was running out, and she'd been rationing meals like a soldier in wartime. The truth was she was drowning, and he was the only one who noticed. Why now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why show up tonight of all nights? Jiwon's jaw tightened. He didn't want to answer. Didn't want to admit that rage had brought him here, that he'd spent months convincing himself she'd betrayed him, that he'd come to punish her for disappearing. I thought you left because you didn't love me anymore. The confession came out rough, unpolished. I thought you found someone else, or that I wasn't enough. I didn't know. His voice broke. I didn't know you were protecting them from me. Amara's eyes glistened. You were never the problem, Jiwon. Your life was. Same thing. No. She shook her head, careful not to wake the babies. You're not your father's empire. You're not the blood on your family's name. You're the man who brought me coffee at 3 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. The man who learned to cook my grandmother's recipes just to make me smile. You're more than what you were born into. Then why did you leave? Because loving you meant watching you become less of that man every day. A tear slipped down her cheek. And I couldn't bring children into a world where their father might not come home, where every knock on the door could be someone coming to collect a debt written in violence. Jiwon's hands curled into fists, not from anger, from helplessness, because she was right. Every word was a truth he'd spent years avoiding. I can't change what I am, he said finally. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? She looked down at the twins, their faces peaceful in sleep, their tiny hands curled into fists like they were already learning to fight. I'm asking you to decide what kind of father you want to be, because they won't care about your empire. They won't care about your power. They'll only care if you're there. The words hit him like a blade between the ribs. Clean, precise, devastating. He thought about his own father, a man who taught him to negotiate with fear, to lead with silence, to inherit a throne built on other people's ruin. A man who never tucked him into bed, never asked about his day, never told him he was loved in any language that mattered. Jiwon had sworn he'd never be like him. But here he was, standing in a dim apartment, staring at two children who didn't know his name, realizing he'd already failed them by not being there from the beginning. I don't know how to be a father, he admitted, the words foreign on his tongue. Neither do I. Amara's lips curved into the saddest smile he'd ever seen. But I'm learning. And if you want to be part of their lives, you'll have to learn too. There was a knock at the door. Jiwon's driver, arms full of bags, diapers, formula, baby clothes in soft colors. The man didn't look at Amara, didn't ask questions, just set everything down and left as silently as he'd come. Jiwon started unpacking. He didn't know what half of it was, but he organized it anyway. Amara watched him, this man who commanded armies, now stacking diapers like they were ammunition. You don't have to do this, she said softly. Yes, I do. He didn't look up. Because if I don't start now, I never will. Elijah stirred in Amara's arms, his small face scrunching up, preparing to cry. Jiwon froze. Amara shifted, trying to soothe him, but her exhaustion made her movements slow. Before she could fully react, Jiwon was beside her. Can I? He hesitated. Can I hold him? Amara's breath caught. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just searched his face for certainty. Then slowly, she extended her arms. Jiwon took his son. The weight was nothing. The responsibility was everything. Elijah's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, looking up at the stranger holding him. And Jiwon felt his entire world recalibrate. Hey, he whispered, his voice softer than Amara had ever heard it. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry you had to come into this world without me. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Elijah didn't understand the words, but he stopped fussing. His tiny hand reached up, fingers brushing Jiwon's jaw, and in that moment, the heir to a criminal empire became something else entirely. He became a father. Jiwon stayed, not just that night, but the next, and the one after that. He slept on Amara's couch, learned to change diapers at 2 a.m., memorized the difference between Mira's hungry cry and Elijah's tired one. He didn't go back to his penthouse, didn't answer most of his calls, didn't attend meetings that would have once been non-negotiable. His world didn't stop. But for the first time in his life, he stopped caring. The empire his father built, the organization that bore his family's name, it all felt distant, like something happening to someone else. On the fourth night, his phone rang. Not the burner he used for business, his personal line, the one only 3 people had. He glanced at the screen. His father. Jiwon's jaw tightened. He looked at Amara, asleep in the chair with Mira against her chest. At Elijah, tucked into the bassinet Jiwon had assembled with hands that usually signed death warrants. He answered, Not now. You've been missing. His father's voice was cold, measured. The voice of a man who didn't ask questions, only gave orders. 4 days, no updates, no appearances. People are noticing. Let them notice. Silence. Then, where are you? Somewhere you've never been. Jiwon's voice was ice. Somewhere that matters. You're with her. It wasn't a question. His father always knew. Always had eyes everywhere. The woman who left you. The one you swore you'd forget. I was wrong. You're making a mistake. No. Jiwon looked at his children, their small bodies rising and falling with breath. I'm fixing one. She's a distraction, a liability. And if you're not careful, she'll be the reason your enemies think you're weak. I don't care what they think. You should. His father's voice dropped, lethal and quiet. Because the moment they see weakness, they'll come for you. And everyone you care about will pay the price. The threat hung in the air, sharp and real. Jiwon had heard it his whole life: the cost of power, the price of caring, the inevitability of loss. Then I'll handle it. He ended the call. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't need one. Amara stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light. She saw him standing by the window, tension radiating off him like heat. "Your father?" she asked quietly. "He knows I'm here." Fear flickered across her face. "Jiwon, he won't touch you." His voice was absolute. "Or them. I'll burn everything to the ground before I let that happen." "That's what I'm afraid of." She stood carefully, still holding Mira. "You can't protect us by starting a war." "I'm not starting one. I'm ending one." He turned to face her, and his eyes were different. Harder. "I've spent my whole life doing what my father wanted, building what he built, becoming what he needed me to be. But I won't do it anymore. Not if it means losing you. Not if it means my children grow up the way I did." "And what about the people who won't let you walk away?" Amara's voice trembled. "The ones who see you as a threat the moment you stop being useful? I'll deal with them." "How?" "However I have to." He crossed the room, closing the distance between them. "I know what I'm asking you to risk. I know what my world looks like. But I also know I can't be their father from a distance. I can't protect you by staying away. I tried that. It didn't work." Amara looked down at Mira, then over at Elijah. Two perfect, fragile lives. 2 reasons to run. 2 reasons to stay. "I don't want them growing up in your world," she whispered. "Neither do I." Jiwon's hand reached out, cupping her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. "So I'll build them a new one. You can't just watch me." His voice was steel-wrapped in promise. "I'll dismantle everything if I have to. I'll walk away from the empire, the name, all of it, but I won't walk away from you. Not again." Amara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love could rewrite bloodlines, that a man born into darkness could choose light. But she'd seen too much, knew too much, understood that empires didn't let go of their heirs without a fight. "They'll come for you," she said quietly. "Let them." Jiwon's lips brushed her forehead, soft and reverent. "I've survived worse. Not with something to lose." The truth of it settled between them like a weight. Before, Jiwon had been untouchable because he had nothing anyone could take. No weakness, no soft spots, no love that could be turned into leverage. But now, he had 3. And his enemies would know it. His father already did. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. Sirens, voices, the rhythm of a world that didn't stop for anyone. But inside that small apartment, time felt suspended. Fragile. Like glass about to shatter. Elijah started to fuss. Jiwon moved instinctively, lifting him from the bassinet, cradling him with hands that had learned gentleness in 4 days. The baby settled almost immediately, his small body trusting in a way that broke something in Jiwon's chest. "He knows you," Amara said softly, watching them. "He shouldn't." Jiwon's voice was rough. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not." She stepped closer, Mira still asleep in her arms. "But you're here now, and that's what matters." They stood there, the 4 of them, a family stitched together by chance and choice, by mistakes and miracles, by a love that had survived separation and silence. But outside that moment, the clock was ticking. Jiwon's father wouldn't wait forever. His organization wouldn't forgive absence. And the enemies circling his empire wouldn't miss the opportunity to strike when he was distracted, when he was human. Jiwon looked at Amara, at Mira, at Elijah, and he made a choice. Not the one his father would have made, not the one his legacy demanded, but the only one that mattered. He would fight, not for power, not for an empire, but for the chance to be the father his children deserved. And if the world came for him because of it, he'd make sure they regretted it. The call came at 3 a.m, not to Jiwon's phone, to the apartment's landline, a number he didn't know Amara still had. The sound cut through the darkness like a scream, sharp and unforgiving. Jiwon was already awake, feeding Elijah while Amara slept. He moved quickly, catching the phone before the second ring, his voice low and lethal. "Who is this?" Silence, then breathing, controlled, deliberate. The kind of silence that spoke louder than words. You have something that belongs to the family. The voice was unfamiliar, but the message wasn't. Your father wants you home. Tell him I am home. The children. The voice didn't change tone, didn't threaten explicitly, didn't need to. He wants to meet them, make sure they're worthy of the name. Jiwon's blood turned to ice. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white. You go near them, you go near her, and I'll make sure you disappear in ways that make people forget you ever existed. Is that a threat, heir? It's a promise. He hung up. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't need to hear the rest. Amara was awake now, standing in the doorway with Mira against her shoulder. Her eyes were wide, terrified, reading the violence in his posture. Jiwon? We need to leave. His voice was calm, but she knew him well enough to hear the storm beneath it. Now. What happened? My father knows about them. He looked at Elijah, still cradled in his arms, oblivious to the danger circling his small life. And he won't stop until he controls them. Amara's breath caught. She'd known this moment would come, had feared it every day since she found out she was pregnant. The Kang family didn't let bloodlines slip away. They collected. They owned. They consumed. Where can we go that he won't find us? Nowhere. Jiwon's jaw tightened. Not unless I end this. End what? My father's reach. He stood, still holding Elijah, his body a wall between his family and the world. His control, his empire, all of it. You can't just... I can. His eyes met hers, and they were fire and ice. Determination and devastation. I've spent my whole life building his kingdom. I know every weakness. Every ally who's only loyal because they're afraid. Every deal that's held together by threats instead of trust. I can dismantle it from the inside. And then what? Amara's voice broke. You think they'll just let you walk away? You think your father will forgive you for destroying everything he built? I don't need his forgiveness. Jiwon crossed the room, careful not to jostle Elijah. I need his empire to crumble so my children can breathe without looking over their shoulders. Amara wanted to argue, to tell him there had to be another way. But she'd grown up watching powerful men destroy each other over pride and legacy. She knew how this story ended. Someone always paid the price. What do you need from me? She asked quietly. The question broke something in him. Because she wasn't fighting him. Wasn't telling him to choose between them and his world. She was standing with him. Ready to run, ready to hide, ready to fight if that's what it took. I need you to trust me. His voice was raw, unguarded. I need you to believe I can keep you safe. I do trust you. She stepped closer, her free hand reaching for his face, her touch grounding him. But I'm terrified of losing you. You won't. You can't promise that. Watch me. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for just a moment. I've made a lot of promises I couldn't keep. But this one, keeping you alive, keeping them safe, I'll die before I break it. The words should have terrified her, but instead, they settled over her like armor. Because she knew Jiwon didn't make threats he couldn't deliver on, didn't make promises he wasn't willing to bleed for. So what's the plan? She asked. I call a meeting. Tell my father I'm ready to come back. That I'm bringing you and the twins to be introduced properly. His voice was steady, calculated. He'll expect submission. Expect me to fall in line like I always have. And instead? Instead, I'm going to show him exactly what happens when you threaten my family. His smile was cold, dangerous, nothing like the man who'd learned to change diapers and warm bottles. I'm going to take everything from him the way he's taken everything from everyone else. Amara should have been afraid of that smile, should have seen the darkness in it and run. But all she felt was relief, because the man who'd walked into her apartment 4 days ago had been lost, drowning in rage and confusion. This man, the one holding their son like he was the most precious thing in the world while planning to dismantle an empire, this man knew exactly who he was. And he'd chosen them. When? She asked. Tomorrow night. Jiwon looked down at Elijah, his expression softening. I'll go alone. You and the twins stay here with protection. No. The word came out firm, absolute. If you're walking into that, we're not staying behind as bait. We go together or we run together. Amara, don't. She cut him off, her voice steel wrapped in love. You don't get to protect me by making yourself a target. We're in this together. That's what you said. So we face it together. Ji-won wanted to argue, wanted to lock her and the twins somewhere safe and handle this alone the way he'd handled everything alone his entire life. But looking at her, this woman who'd carried his children in secret, who'd survived 16 days of motherhood without help, who stood in front of him now refusing to be saved like some fragile thing, he realized she was right. They were stronger together, even if it meant walking into fire. Okay. He nodded slowly. Together. Amara exhaled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. So what do we do until tomorrow night? We prepare. Ji-won's voice shifted, becoming the strategist, the heir, the man who'd been trained since childhood to navigate war. I need to make calls, secure allies, make sure the people who hate my father more than they fear him know this is their chance. And if it doesn't work, then we disappear. He said it simply, like it was the easiest thing in the world. I have accounts he doesn't know about, properties in places he'd never think to look. We can vanish tonight if we need to. But you don't want to run. No. His voice was quiet but certain. Because running means they win, means my children grow up looking over their shoulders, waiting for the day someone finds us. I won't do that to them. Amara looked at Mira, asleep and perfect, her small face peaceful in a way that made Amara's chest ache. Then at Elijah, his dark eyes blinking slowly, fighting sleep. These were the reasons everything had changed. The reasons Ji-won had walked away from meetings and ignored calls and slept on an uncomfortable couch for 4 days. I love you. The words came out soft, unexpected. I never stopped, even when I left. Even when I was terrified of what loving you meant. Ji-won's breath caught. He looked at her like she'd just handed him the world. Say it again. I love you, Kang Ji-won. Her voice was stronger now, certain. And I'm choosing to believe you can do this, that we can survive this. He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of every promise he didn't have words for. Elijah made a small noise between them, and they broke apart, both of them laughing quietly at the perfect, terrible timing. We should sleep, Amara said, though she knew neither of them would. We should, Ji-won agreed, knowing the same. Instead, they stayed awake, feeding the twins, talking in whispers about futures they weren't sure they'd have, making plans and contingencies and promises they hoped they could keep. And when the sun finally rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they were still there. Still together. Still fighting for the chance to be a family in a world that didn't make room for soft things. But softness, Ji-won was learning, could be the sharpest weapon of all. Because the men who came for him expecting the heir, cold, calculating, ruthless, wouldn't know how to fight the father, the man who had something worth protecting, something worth dying for. And if they pushed him, he'd show them exactly what that looked like. The meeting was set for 9 p.m. at the family estate, a sprawling property in upstate New York that looked like old money and tasted like blood. Ji-won had grown up in that house, had learned to negotiate in its dining room, to strategize in its library, to become his father's weapon in its silence. He'd sworn he'd never bring Amara here, never let this place touch her. But choices had a way of making liars out of everyone. They arrived in an armored car, Ji-won driving, Amara in the passenger seat with both twins strapped into car seats they'd bought that morning. The babies were asleep, blissfully unaware that their small lives were about to collide with a legacy built on broken bones and buried secrets. You can still turn around, Amara said quietly, her hand on his arm. We can run. Start over somewhere he'll never find us. He'd find us. Ji-won's voice was flat, certain. And when he did, he'd make sure I watched him take everything I love before he killed me. That's who my father is. Amara's grip tightened. She'd heard stories about the elder Kang, rumors that circulated in whispers, about men who crossed him and disappeared, about families who lost everything overnight, about a man who built an empire by making people believe death was a mercy compared to his anger. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. Ji-won's hand covered hers. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. What keeps you alive? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his expression softened. You. Them. The idea that maybe I can be something other than what I was born to be. They pulled through the gates. Armed men nodded as they passed, soldiers loyal to the family, not to Ji-won. The house loomed ahead, all stone and shadow, lit from within like something out of a Gothic novel. Ji-won parked, didn't move, just sat there, his hands on the wheel, his jaw tight. "I need you to promise me something," he said finally. "Anything. If this goes wrong, if I tell you to run, you take them and you go. You don't look back. You don't try to help me. You just survive." Ji-won. "Promise me, Amara." His voice cracked. "Please." She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd never leave him, that they were in this together, that she'd fight beside him until the end. But looking at Mira and Elijah, so small and perfect in their car seats, she knew she couldn't promise that. "I promise," she whispered. He nodded, exhaled, then stepped out of the car. Amara followed, moving carefully, unbuckling Mira while Ji-won got Elijah. They walked toward the house like soldiers approaching a battlefield, their children held close, their hearts in their throats. The door opened before they reached it. A man Amara didn't recognize, tall, thin, with eyes that saw too much, gestured them inside. "He's waiting in the study." Ji-won didn't respond. Just walked past him, his body a shield between his family and everything else. The house was exactly as Amara had imagined. Cold, expensive, empty in the way places are when they've never known real warmth. They reached the study. Ji-won paused, his hand on the door. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "No matter what happens." Then he opened the door. Inside, sitting behind a massive desk like a king on a throne, was Kang Dae-sung, Ji-won's father, the architect of everything Ji-won had tried to escape. He was older than Amara expected. 60s maybe, with gray hair and sharp eyes and a smile that looked like it had been carved from stone. He didn't stand when they entered, didn't acknowledge Amara, just stared at his son with an expression that could have been pride or disgust or both. "You're late," Dae-sung said. "I'm here." Ji-won's voice was ice. "And you brought them." Dae-sung's eyes finally shifted to Amara, then to the twins. His expression didn't change, didn't soften. "My grandchildren. They're not yours." Ji-won stepped forward, his body language aggressive. "They're mine, and you'll never touch them." Dae-sung laughed, not a warm sound, a cold, calculated thing. "You think you get to decide that? You think you can walk away from this family and I'll just let you?" "I'm not walking away. I'm burning it down." The room went silent. Even the air felt heavy, oppressive. Dae-sung stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "You're making a mistake, Ji-won. The only mistake I made was waiting this long." Ji-won's voice was steady, absolute. "I know everything, father. Every dirty deal. Every person you've threatened. Every alliance held together by fear. And I've already made calls. Already told people that if anything happens to me, everything I know goes public." Dae-sung's expression darkened. "You'd destroy your own family? You destroyed it the day you made me choose between being your heir and being human." Ji-won's hand tightened around Elijah. "But I'm done choosing. I'm walking away. And if you try to stop me, I'll make sure the empire you spent your life building crumbles so fast you won't have time to watch it fall." For a moment, Dae-sung just stared. Then he smiled. Slow, dangerous. "You think you're the first son to try this? To think love makes you stronger than legacy? I don't think it. I know it. Then you're a fool." Dae-sung moved around the desk, his presence filling the room like smoke. "Because love makes you weak, makes you vulnerable, gives your enemies exactly what they need to destroy you. Let them try." Ji-won's voice was steel. "I've spent my whole life being your weapon, your heir, your tool. But I'm done. And if you can't accept that, then you've already lost me." Dae-sung stopped a few feet away. His eyes moved to Amara, studying her like she was a problem to solve. "You did this, turned my son into something soft." "No." Amara's voice was quiet but firm. "I showed him he could be something more than what you made him." "And what's that?" "Human." She met his eyes, refusing to flinch. "Something you stopped being a long time ago." The insult hung in the air. Ji-won tensed, ready to step between them, ready to fight. But Dae-sung just laughed again. That same cold, empty sound. "You have spirit. he said to Amara. I'll give you that. But spirit doesn't stop bullets, doesn't protect children from men who see them as leverage. Neither does fear, Amara shot back. And that's all you have. All you've ever had. People don't follow you because they respect you. They follow you because they're terrified of what happens if they don't. And you think that's weak? I think it's pathetic. Her voice was steady, cutting. You built an empire on terror and called it power. But the moment someone stops being afraid of you, it all falls apart. And Jiwon's not afraid anymore. Daesung's smile vanished. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and for the first time, Amara saw something flicker in the old man's eyes. Not fear, not anger, realization. You're really going to do this, Daesung said quietly. Throw away everything for them. Not throw away. Jiwon's voice was firm, final. Choose, and I choose them. Every time. Daesung nodded slowly. Then he turned, walking back to his desk. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, set it on the desk between them. Then take this, he said. Documentation, accounts, everything you need to disappear properly. Consider it my parting gift. Jiwon didn't move. Why? Because you're my son. Daesung's voice was softer now, almost human. And maybe I'm tired of watching you destroy yourself trying to be me. He paused. Go, before I change my mind. Jiwon wanted to argue, to demand to know what the catch was. But looking at his father, really looking, he saw something he'd never seen before. Resignation, maybe even regret. He took the folder. This doesn't make us even. I know. Daesung sat back down, suddenly looking older. But maybe it's a start. Jiwon turned, gesturing for Amara to follow. They walked toward the door, hearts pounding, not believing they were actually leaving. That it could be this easy. They were almost out when Daesung spoke again. Jiwon. He stopped, didn't turn around. Be a better father than I was. Jiwon's throat tightened. He didn't respond. Just kept walking. Out of the study. Out of the house. Out of the life that had tried to consume him. They reached the car. Buckled in the twins. Drove through the gates. And only when they were miles away, the estate disappearing in the rearview mirror, did Jiwon finally exhale. Did that just happen? Amara whispered. I think so. His hand found hers. I think we're free. She wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe they could just drive away and start over and never look back. But she'd seen the way Daesung looked at the twins, like they were pieces on a board, like they were leverage for a future war. This isn't over, she said quietly. I know. Jiwon's jaw tightened. But for tonight, we won. And that, Amara thought, was enough. For tonight, they had each other. Had Mira and Elijah safe and sleeping. Had a chance at something that looked like normal. Tomorrow, they'd figure out the rest. Tomorrow, they'd plan and prepare and build defenses. But tonight, they drove toward a future that was theirs to choose. And for the first time in months, Amara let herself hope. 3 months later, they were still alive. Still together. Still fighting for the life they'd carved out of chaos. Jiwon had kept his promise. Used the information in his father's folder to disappear properly. New identities, secure accounts, a house in Portland under a name no one would trace. It was smaller than his penthouse, quieter. Normal in a way that should have felt suffocating but instead felt like breathing. Amara had stopped looking over her shoulder, mostly. There were still nights when a car backfired and her heart stopped. Still moments when Jiwon's phone rang and she braced for the call that would end everything. But they were fewer now, further apart. The twins were thriving. Mira had Jiwon's eyes and Amara's smile. Elijah had her determination and his father's quiet intensity. They were 3 months old, growing so fast it made Amara's chest ache. And Jiwon, the man who'd once commanded empires, now commanded bath time and bedtime stories and diaper changes with the same fierce focus. He'd changed. Not completely. There were still edges, still shadows, still moments when Amara caught him staring out windows like he was waiting for enemies who'd never come. But he was softer now. More present. More human. They'd built something. Not an empire. Something better. A life. It was afternoon, sun streaming through the windows when Jiwon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then answered. Amara watched from across the room, Mira in her arms, as his expression shifted from casual to focused, to something else entirely. When? He asked. Pause. How many? Another pause. Understood. He hung up, stared at the phone for a long moment, then looked at Amara. That was Min, one of my father's oldest allies. Amara's stomach dropped. What happened? My father's dead. The words came out flat, emotionless. Heart attack, 2 days ago. The room went still. Amara didn't know what to feel. Relief? Fear? This man had threatened her children, had built an empire on suffering, had been the shadow hanging over their new life. But he'd also let them go, had given them the tools to disappear. Are you okay? She asked quietly. Jiwon didn't answer right away, just kept staring at his phone like it held answers he didn't want. I don't know what I am. Do you need to go back? For the funeral? He shook his head. No, I'm not that person anymore. Then what are you? He looked up at her, at Mira, at Elijah, who was kicking his feet in the bassinet, babbling to himself. I'm their father, your partner, the man who chose this over everything else. That's who I am now. Amara crossed the room, still holding Mira, and kissed him. Soft. Sure. Then that's enough. He pulled her close, careful of the baby between them, and buried his face in her hair. The organization's going to fracture. Min says people are already positioning for control. It's going to be chaos. Will they come for you? Maybe. He pulled back, his hands framing her face. But I'm not going back. Not for power. Not for legacy. Not for anything. What if they force you? Then I'll remind them why they were afraid of me in the first place. His voice was quiet, lethal. But I'll do it from here, from this life. I'm not that heir anymore. I'm something else. What's that? Free. He smiled, and it was real this time. Warm, human. I'm finally free. Amara wanted to believe it, wanted to think they could just exist here in this small house with their small family and never worry about the world Jiwon had left behind. But she knew better, knew that empires didn't die quietly, that power vacuums pulled everything into their orbit. We should be ready, she said, just in case. We will be. Jiwon's hand moved to Mira's small head, his touch gentle. I'll make sure of it. But I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. I'm just living. And if someone tries to take that from us, they'll find out exactly what happens when you threaten a man who has something worth protecting. The words should have scared her, should have sounded like the beginning of a war. But instead, they sounded like a promise, a boundary, a line drawn in the sand that said this far, no further. That night, after the twins were asleep, Amara and Jiwon sat on the porch. The air was cool, the sky clear, the world quiet in a way that felt like grace. Do you miss it? Amara asked. The power? The control? Jiwon thought about it, really thought. Sometimes, he admitted. But then Elijah looks at me like I'm his whole world, or Mira smiles, or you laugh at something stupid I said, and I remember what I was missing before, what I gave up for power. And this is better. He turned to look at her. This is everything. Amara leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. I love you. I love you too. His arm wrapped around her. More than I thought I could love anything. They sat there in the quiet, two people who'd survived empires and fear and choices that could have destroyed them. Two people who'd chosen each other again and again until choosing became the only thing that made sense. Inside, the twins slept, safe, protected. Loved in ways that had nothing to do with legacy or bloodlines or the weight of names they'd never have to carry. This was their empire now. Not built on fear, not held together by violence. Just 4 people in a small house, building something that looked like normal and felt like home. And if the world came for them, if the shadows of Jiwon's past tried to reclaim him, they'd face it together. As a family. As people who'd learned that the strongest empires aren't built on power. They're built on love. And theirs was unshakable.